Do. The ultimate privilege. In quarantine, I've been thinking a lot about my childhood experiences, good and bad. First off, I consider myself extremely lucky. I grew up in Long Island, New York, one of the most affluent places on the planet, went to a great school, and made great friends. But I found myself thinking back on unpleasant childhood experiences, and I started to focus on the negative aspects of how I grew up while I was sitting alone with my own thoughts in quarantine. And while it can be helpful to reflect on bad experiences, I made sure to remind myself of one thing, that no matter what my childhood seems like looking back on it, I had the ultimate privilege of growing up in a stable two-parent household. And there's so much evidence that supports significant increases in well-being, financial success, and emotional development just from growing up with two parents who love you. And that is something that I unquestionably had. And so just thinking about that, being born into a stable two-parent household, first of all, it's an amazing thing to be born at all, to be a conscious human being put into this body. I don't know what the chances are of actually being born, but it's something in the trillions, the 1 in 2 trillion or whatever, something crazy of, what are the chances of someone actually coming into life and being on this planet and being in a situation like this. So I could have not been born at all. So just being born is something to be grateful for and to be a part of this whole conscious experience. And two, I could have been born into any place on the planet. I could have been born into any family, any situation, a broken home, a poor neighborhood, a shitty, not a shitty country, but a country with a lot more problems going on in it. And like I said, I grew up in Long Island, New York, and Plainview, in a nice white Jewish town where not a lot of shit went down. And I sometimes forget to remind myself how lucky I am to have been born into that situation and to be in a two-parent household and have two people that are constantly there to care about me and guide me. And I had two brothers as well. And having that influence on my life is the ultimate privilege, I think. The word privilege is being thrown around a lot with skin color and wealth and things like that. And while there's no doubt that being born into a wealthy family gives you a large amount of privilege, and there are ways that I'm sure that I've been treated because I have white skin color as opposed to someone who's darker, who's black or Mexican, Latino, whatever. I still do think that growing up in a two-parent household is probably the best thing that could have happened to me. Growing up in a stable two-parent household with two other brothers in a situation where, I was cared for. I was able to pursue the things that I wanted to pursue. I was given creative freedom. I was allowed to play sports. I was allowed to, live life to the fullest that I possibly could as a kid. And there are a lot of people that don't get to experience that grow up in broken homes or that grow up with single parents where maybe they have to have a job in middle school and high school to lend financial support, or maybe they just don't get the guidance that they did from having a mother and a father in the same home. And I'm not talking shit about single parents at all. Being a single parent is incredibly difficult, and I admire the people that are able to do it well. And it makes me appreciate more that I was lucky to be born into a situation where I have two parents and got the emotional benefits, the financial benefits, and the just the overall well-being of having that situation, growing up like that. And I think it's I mentioned I was thinking back on my childhood and reflecting on some of the more negative experiences. When I'm sitting alone in solo quarantine, your mind tends to wander off and think about shit and get caught up into it. And while I think can be a positive experience to dig through negative trauma, I want to be careful about not forgetting how grateful I am to have had that baseline childhood that I had. No matter what happened to me, no matter what experiences I think are negative, I think it's important for me to remember that I have so much to be grateful for, and I need to do a better job of reminding myself of how really life-changing those things are. Like I said, I could have been born into any country, in any situation, into any family in the world, and I'm extremely lucky to have been born into the family that I have been born into. So my challenge to you, and also my challenge to myself, is, I'm aware that everyone watching this video or listening to this podcast, not everyone is as lucky as I am and had this situation that I am, and we're all coming from different backgrounds. But to think about something from your childhood that you are grateful for, even if you didn't come from a 2-parent home, even if you grew up in a poor neighborhood, even if you had a particularly traumatic childhood. I can't imagine what it's like to having gone through a childhood that triggers you emotionally all the time. But to think of something positive from that experience, to take away something positive from your childhood that you can look back on and say, you know what, like, no matter what happened, I'm really grateful for this. I'm really grateful for this situation, or how I grew up, or the area I was born into, the parents I had, the situations I was exposed to, the people that raised me. To think back and really ponder what you have to be grateful for in your childhood.